So I have to speak on the recent murders of Alton Sterling and Philando Castile because it's important. Of course, I have other videos that I would like to be doing, and not this one, but on a channel like mine, it's important that I talk about these things. So there were more murders of black people at the hands of the police this week, but since Sterling and Castile are the main ones that are getting the most attention in the news right now, I feel like it's a bit pertinent to discuss what's been going on with those two cases. So Alton Sterling was murdered by Baton Rouge police officers after a homeless man called 911 and said that Sterling was flashing a gun. Now, Sterling did that. The homeless man called 911 because Sterling showed him his gun to get the homeless man to leave him alone and stop pestering him. Because apparently the homeless man was asking Sterling for money, and he kept being persistent about it. So Sterling showed his gun and said, "I told you to leave me alone." Sterling did not have his weapon out when the cops tasered him, tackled him, and pinned him down on the ground. And the cops already knew Sterling had a weapon because they were told that on the 911 call. So, yet they yelled gun after pinning him down on the ground. These are two cops pinning this man on the ground, and one of them yelled gun followed by other expletives, and then one of the officers shot him twice, and then a couple more times, killing him, even though Sterling never reached for his gun. So as soon as the word broke out about this incident, we already know what happens. You know, people start looking into Sterling's life because obviously he did something to warrant being killed in cold blood. And sure enough, especially in the eyes of all the conservatives and right-winger news outlets and Twitter handles and all the like, he did. It turns out that Alton Sterling is a convicted felon, so obviously he acted in a way that prompted the officers to shoot him dead, even though, he never reached for his gun, never resisted arrest, and wasn't flashing his weapon at the time that the police accosted him. Now, from what I've looked up, it's true that he was arrested and convicted when he was 20 years old of raping a 14-year-old girl. Now, does this mean that the police were justified in murdering Sterling in cold blood? No. Now, I at the same time, I recognize that holding that position is difficult for me as a black woman because, what if that happened to me? What if I were that 14-year-old girl's mother, or if I were that 14-year-old girl, or within a group of black women who were sexually preyed upon by adult black men when they were 14 years old, when they were 14-year-old black girls. So, the best way I can put it is that I am for accountability of Sterling's actions. I'm for accountability for what he did and for when black men abuse black women and prey on black girls. And I am also for accountability for police officers who kill black people because of their implicit biases about black people. And on the other hand, we have Philando Castile, who by all intents and respectability politics purposes did everything right. You know, he had no criminal record, he had a good job at a school or a university, if I remember correctly. You know, he was beloved by people in his community and his family, and he was a legal gun owner. He had a permit. And his only crime was basically being black at the wrong place and the wrong time via looking like a robbery suspect because of, as you know, the officer who shot him put it, the driver looks like one of our suspects because of the wide set nose. Oh, and he's also guilty for reaching for his gun permit and his driver's license like the officer asked him to. Now, look at both of these cases and realize that it doesn't really matter what black people do or don't do. We are still murdered and thought of as lesser than, regardless. And this is why the very idea of respectability politics is shit. Whether we're a felon or a teacher or a celebrity or an activist in a society where black still means inferior or lesser than or thugs, savages, welfare queens, etc., respectability solves nothing and saves no one. So every time a black person is murdered by police officers for being black at the wrong place at the wrong time, dumbass white people and cooning ass black people love to deflect instances of interracial crime and killings with instances of intraracial crime and killings, as if, you know, as if the latter cancels out the former or refutes its existence entirely, and it fucking doesn't. What about black on black crime? What the fuck about it? It's fucking irrelevant in cases where black people are killed by the police with fucking impunity, dumbasses. Also, when you say black on black crime, recognize what you're doing when you use that term. Because when you say black on black crime, you're using dog whistle racist code for the idea of interracial crime amongst black people somehow being so much worse than intraracial crime among other ethnic groups, because black, therefore savages, thugs, inferior, etc. Never mind that white people commit more crime against other white people than black folk or even Muslim folk commit against white people. But fuck facts, am I right? Never mind that there's no empirical evidence linking police killings of black people to black interracial crime. So all people like Mundane Matt and Red Pill Philosophy are doing is perpetuating the lie that black people are responsible for police brutality and that black people are pathologically more prone to committing violence because, you know, thug, inferior, etc. And for those black people who do this as well, I hope that you at least recognize now from seeing both these cases that, as I said earlier, respectability doesn't prevent black people from being killed for no reason. I was on Twitter and some random black dude named Kevin Gates. What's a Kevin Gates? Anyway, he was on MTV or BET and someone retweeted this clip of him talking about how he was harassed by cops for, quote, acting like a nigger. But that he didn't mean nigger as in its original meaning and intent, but nigger as in ignorant or belligerent. Since he was acting belligerent, he he thinks he deserved the treatment that he received. Now, this is really something that I sincerely wish we as black folk never internalized and started perpetuating, because never in the history of any fucking thing has nigger meant ignorant or belligerent. No white police officer has ever called a white person a nigger for being belligerent. So, I mean, at most maybe they've been told that, you know, that they're acting like a nigger, or, you know, but what the hell do you think the meaning of that sentence is? Here's a hint. It doesn't mean stop acting belligerent. And for another black person to say this, and for so many black folk, especially a good number of black celebrities, Kendrick Lamar, to perpetuate this, and, you know, this all lives matter colorblind bullshit, it's just sickening. It's just really sickening. So, since these two killings have taken place, there's been a bunch of protests in St. Paul, Baton Rouge, in New York City, and in DC. I hope that they continue and that people continue to speak out. And I also hope that folks are being as careful as possible and also know your rights, because a bunch of people, including Black Lives Matter activist DeRay, they were unlawfully arrested and held for like 12 plus hours. As of now, you know, the time I'm recording this, it's 7 p.m. Sunday evening, DeRay was released. So I'm glad for that. And as for those who chose this week to be very open and remove all doubt of their internalized biases and casual racism, like red pill philosophy, like mundane Matt, and also for those who have been doing so for the past week or so, like the amazing atheist who clearly doesn't know what gentrification is or the effect that it has on communities filled with people who are not white, and doesn't actually care to know, and thinks it's perfectly okay to dox black people who take him to task for his racist words. Fuck them. These are people who are not looking to have their worldviews actually be on par with what's going on in the real world and learning beyond what they know. So let's try to spend less time trying to teach them and begging them to have any sort of empathy, respect for us, or humanity, because they're fresh out.